thousands of miles away. I missed her, and I wish I could have her back. I felt the heaviness come into my chest again. I took a deep breath, and I told myself that now wasn't the time to think about this. There'd be plenty of time later. Right now, I had to think about my father. When I got to the room, Sapit was sitting next to my father's bed, and they were talking quietly. They stopped when I walked in. Aside from them looking tired, my father seemed to be doing well. I was relieved. "We got him," I said. Sapit laughed, and my father let out a whoop of joy. "Nice going, son. Nice going," he said. I told them what had happened. When I finished, Sapit stood and put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm afraid I must be going," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Back to Miss Island," he said. "They are waiting for me." My father put his hand out. "Thanks for everything, Sapit," he said, and they shook hands warmly. "Perhaps we'll see each other again someday." Perhaps, I thought. What was he talking about? I looked at my father, but he gave me no indication of what was going on. "Walk with me, Jacob," Sapit said. I followed him out of the room. As we walked down the hallway, he didn't say anything. When we got outside the hospital, he pointed and said, "My ride." An old truck was parked in front. Standing in the back of it were half a dozen Maasai dressed in traditional clothing. "What's going on, Sapit?" "I must go back," he said. "I will live in Satonic's kraal." "I understand that, but—" "Your father will explain," he said, and slipped the snake amulet over his head. "This is yours." "No," I protested. "I want you to keep it." "It does not belong to me," he said, and put the amulet over my head. "Wear it always. It is very important." "But I don't understand," I said. "Why won't I see you again?" "You have accomplished your goal in Kenya," he said. "The goal was greater than you thought. It is time for you to move on to another goal." He spit on his hand and held it out. I didn't put my head down. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. Sapit smiled and said, "It's customary." I bowed, and he gently placed his hand on my head. When I looked up, he was still smiling. "Goodbye, my good friend," he said. Tears welled in my eyes. "Goodbye, Sapit." He climbed into the back of the truck with the others. I watched in disbelief as it pulled away from the curb and merged into the busy traffic. Sapit and the others waved. I held my hand up in the air until the truck disappeared around a corner, then put it down. I stood on the curb for a long time. I couldn't imagine not seeing Sapit again. Finally, I walked slowly back into the hospital. When I got to my father's room, I sat in the chair next to his bed and put my head in my hands. "I don't understand why we won't see him again," I said. "Because we're going back to New York." I looked up at him. New York? I felt my heart thumping in my chest. We hadn't had time to discuss what he was going to do with me. "My leg needs some attention," he continued, "and I talked with your uncle in Nebraska. He was very worried about you. You shouldn't have taken off like that, Jake." "I didn't have a choice," I said defensively. "There are always choices," he said quietly. "What about Sam?" I asked. "He's moved out of the apartment, and he's about ready to head down to Honduras. He was worried about you too, and happy to hear that you were all right." "And what about me?" I asked quietly, not all certain that I wanted the answer. "Well, your uncle's offered to take you in." "I don't want to go there." "I know," he said, and looked at me for a few moments. I told him that it was a very generous offer, but I didn't think I could get along without you, so I guess you're stuck with me. I looked at my father and grinned.